on the panel we have Jun-san, Masato-san, Tagai-san, and Mark-san. The motion for this round is this House believes that student loans should mandate payment only to those who are capable of paying it back, including but not limited to having a stable job or is a child of wealthy parents. Without further ado, I'd like to call upon the Prime Minister to please deliver your speech in 7 minutes. Here.
What we want to do as the government side is to alleviate the disproportionate stress and burden placed on poor students in the status quo. And we think that because they are the ones who are suffering most from the student loan system, whereas even though they should be the ones receiving the most merit, we think that this is a necessary plan to take. And so this is why we are very proud to propose this plan today. As the model, we have a very simple model. We first want to make this something of a sort of a scholarship, like a scholarship that you don't have to return, right? And in order to prevent students from slacking off in their academic endeavors, we want to constantly check for sustained academic commitment. We think that this is necessary so that even though they are student loans that we're giving them, they don't waste that money because they don't waste that money on useless things. Okay. Yes, madam.
Does that mean you're not going to allow any types of scholarships that students have to be paid?
What?
You're going to have no scholarships that students have to be paid? All of it's going to be provided, the ones you don't have to pay back?
No, I believe the motion targets the poor students, right? We think that there are going to be plenty of, no thank you, we think that there are going to be plenty of other scholarships that people can choose from because there are many types of families, right? If they think that there is a scholarship that is best suited for them, then they can choose that. And furthermore, we won't allow students that can pay for that university on their own, or students with families that have a prospect of paying back through a scholarship. Those people won't be able to apply for these special student loans. All right. So let me first move on to an analysis of the nature of student loans, and then I'm going to give you a comparison between the poor and rich students and their families. And thirdly, I'm going to explain to you the status quo, and then I'm going to compare that with our after plan. Okay, so firstly, the nature of student loans. We believe that student loans should not be just a simple reward for their high academic abilities, but something of a fund to help them achieve the dream of changing their lives, right? So we think that that's what differentiates student loans in our paradigm from simple scholarships, because scholarships are given to those based on a height of their academic abilities, whereas student loans should be based mostly on whether the students are rich enough too poor to pay for the university fees. And then we think that secondly, there is a very big difference between poor students and rich students and their families. Because we think that the poor students, the reason why they are poor is not because they themselves don't have any income, but mostly because the families as a whole don't have a stable income, right? They don't have a prospect of paying back the scholarships that exist right now, and they don't have a prospect of paying the school fees on a regular basis either. That's because they have unpaid back loans themselves, maybe, as a family, or maybe they're not at a stable job, things like that, right? And we think that these things, when student loans are such a burden on students, we think that these families will be very hesitant to send their children to university. Or even if the families internally feel that they should take the risk by signing up for a scholarship, we think that the students themselves would be too reluctant to tell their parents that they want to go to university. We think that the sheer prospect of having to pay back the money at some point, even though they have they are unable to see a future in which they can actually save up the money to do that. We think that that's going to hinder them strongly from signing up, enrolling in university. Whereas rich students, or not even rich students, thank you, not even rich people, but families with a stable income, we think that they have the prospect, they are able to predict a future in which they are able to pay back the money, right? Because even if they can't right now, even if the family doesn't have enough savings to pay for university right now, they see a future in which they save up enough money on a regular basis in order to pay back the scholarships or pay back the university fees. We think that this is the big difference, the difference in what they see as a future outlook. Yes.
Okay, how do you evaluate, or how do you check the financial status of students? Because you are going to give only those scholarship, student loans to those people who are not capable of paying back, right?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, we think that there are already a lot of scholarships that are meant for poor students. Those things do check their families' income status. We think that those systems are applicable in this case as well. We also think that, we think that those systems are applicable in this case as well. Alright, so now I've compared the poor students to the rich students and highlighted the plight that they are at. And so now I'm going to explain to you the status quo of the poor students, and then I'm going to compare that with the after plan of our paradigm. Alright, so in the status quo I told you that student loans, because you have to pay them back at some point, this is a great burden and stress for students. Even though these poor students want to go to university to achieve financial success or to study what they're truly interested in, something like an academic area that has been truly fascinating for them since their childhood, they're not able to do that because they know that after they graduate it's going to be difficult to pay it back. They know that the moment you graduate and you get a stable job, even if it is a very, very badly paying job, they're going to have to pay back the loan, and they know that that's going to be very difficult. So more and more people give up university altogether because they know that difficult status quo, right? A lot of people have to give up their dreams and they can't escape the financial crisis that they're in, even though student loans time, even though there is this system of student loans and scholarships is meant to save those people from those financial crises. But in the after plan, we think that these people with passion to change their lives or to study without worrying about money, they can study whatever they want, right? We think that they can go into research careers too if they wanted to. We think that we give them more diverse options without having to be hindered by their family's financial issues. Because this is a unique merit that can only be achieved by giving them funds instead of loaning them funds, we are very proud to propose.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Leader of Opposition, please deliver your speech in 7 minutes. Here.
Opening government was talking as if we're just going to increase the number of scholarships that you don't have to pay back. But that's not the motion, right? We're talking about the current scholarships that you have, these student loans, which you have to pay back, whether it's okay or whether it's actually good for the students to actually allow some exceptions that they don't have to pay back. On opening government, on opening opposition, we say this is rather counterproductive. When you see what kind of organizations who are providing these scholarships, not just government but private organizations, we think rather it's going to make the selections more difficult and only people with good academic ability or people who are already currently in a good status will get it. So we think rather this is counterproductive, making it difficult for poor people to access to these scholarships. So in my speech, I'm going to mainly talk about two things. First, I'm going to talk about how this will actually decrease the number of scholarships and make it difficult for poor students to access to it. Second of all, I'd like to talk about how this pressure that opening government was talking about is actually good for students and actually makes them motivated to move forward and actually strive to get a good job or to get good grades. So considering that, let's go on to our arguments, and all rebuttals will be included inside my speech. So first, opening government didn't really contextualize what kind of world we're talking about. So let's look at the scholarships right now. There are scholarships that the government provides, but we think the majority of these scholarships are provided by private organizations. For example, in Japan, there's JASO, like JASSO, which provides lots of scholarships, that kind of organization that provides lots of scholarships to students, right? And we think that governments are partially part of this, but we think the main provision of these scholarships are by these private organizations. This is because these private organizations can get some kind of profit from these student loans. They provide student loans and they provide interest instead, like they have to pay 3% more or 5% more, and this is it's a certain type of business. So we think, considering that these are actually private organizations, what happens when we don't force these corporations to act? When corporations are not forced to get back the money they provided? First, we think the selection of who to give scholarships will get more strict, right? Because these organizations want money. So they will only provide it to people who definitely can give it back. So who are these kind of people? For example, they see the selection when you go to university. They see your grades in high school. They see whether you did like club activities and whether you had good, like if you won prizes or stuff like that. But recognize that these people are already who are currently able to get good grades in high school or win debate tournaments and stuff, are actually relatively in a good status. They were, for example, able to go to clam school, or they were able to go to lots of practice matches and get that stuff. So we think that the selection will be focused on these specific people who actually are currently in a privileged status. But we also think that the number of scholarships will actually decrease too. Because if these organizations cannot get back the money that they provided, we think that the number of scholarships will decrease. We think this is also in the context of, like, for example, government student loans too will also start to decrease too. Because there will be people who won't be able to pay back, and these people, the government or these organizations will not be able to collect all the money they provided. So the number of these scholarships will decrease, which means the amount of students or all these children who are in poverty is going to get difficult to access to these kind of scholarships. So what is going to actually happen by this motion? We think in this motion, at the end of the day, we're only going to provide these scholarships who are in a privileged status. Like there are these children who were not able to get good grades in high school or university, will not be able to go there because of the financial problems they have, or they'll have to quit university, or they'll have to rely on very black corporations who have very high interest. So we think at the end of the day, this may look good for students if you think that they don't have to pay it back, but if you look at the perspective, who is giving this and what is their intention, we think that when students are not obligated to actually give back these scholarships, the number of these will decrease, and that the people who will be able to access it will be very limited as well. But second of all, we think that these scholarships, this pressure that opening government was talking about is actually good to these students. This goes on to the second point. Because when they are actually mandated to pay back these scholarships, they have the obligation. In a certain way, they are forced to actually give back these scholarships. We think this is very good because humans tend to be very lazy. If you're going to study for a test or either play, people tend to choose whether to play because it's something easy. So when you have a test in university, you tend to go to nomikai instead of studying. Or when you job hunting, if they don't have so much incentive to actually get a good job, they tend to slack off. So we think this actually applies to, we think that this kind of human nature of going the easy way can be prevented by this pressure. Because if we do understand that there are other incentives that these children would have to get a good job, but we think that this pressure from student loans is different from other pressures. Because when you're young, you don't really foresee the future. Like when you're in high school, you're not really worried about your job hunting. But what's different what's like unique to student loans is that you see that you're borrowing money from these organizations every day. At the end of each period, you see that like $100 that these student organizations pay that, and I have to pay that back. So there's that constant pressure on students who think that I have to get a good job and I have to get money and I have to work hard right now. So we think that pressure that these students will get on this everyday, on these basis, will incentivize children to get good GPAs or actually work hard to get job hunting. So we think that of course there are students who are suffering right now because of what opening government talked about. We do recognize that there are specific children who are not able to get jobs, but we think that when there is no incentive at all for these people in poverty to get a good job because they don't feel the pressure to work hard, we think there'll be more people on our side of the house where children slack off, especially like when their parents are not really in a good status and it's difficult for them to foresee the future or difficult for them to understand the importance of education. We think this pressure, this outside pressure provided from these student loans is very effective to actually motivate these children to actually plan for their future. So we think, considering these reasons, we think that by actually allowing these exceptions, we think that it makes it difficult for poor people to access to these scholarships, and second of all, we think that it is actually harmful for the students because it decreases the pressure and decreases the pressure for these children to actually work hard to get a good future. So therefore, we are very proud to oppose.
Thank you, your opposition. Next, Deputy Prime Minister, please deliver your speech in 7 minutes. Here.
Too fair is there in the speech of leader official. So this firstly about what is the importance of decreasing those access to the student loan, and secondly about they totally misunderstand our model or stances. So on that point, we have two big engagement on the annual speech, and nextly I'll talk about the legitimacy why this motion is so legitimate to take, and we have two arguments. So let me explain one by one. Firstly about engagement to the opposition. So we have two arguments. So as I said, like they talk about like the decreasing the access for those money, and so subsidy is serious because however that they talked about those subsidies for the who are capable to pay back those money for the state or government, because therefore we don't see any importance on that point, because without any subsidy, without any loan, student loan, that they may pay back, they may be able to pay back those money for the state, and so we don't see any importance. And secondly about the So they say like after taking proposal, the incentive to study will decrease by giving these subsidies. However, we think that this is not true because two reasons here. Firstly, they misunderstood our model because we assess the students and how they study and what they study in the university. So that is the misunderstood. And secondly, about this motion can be another incentive to study for students to study very hard, because if one student rude to study become rude to study and going to Nomikai every day, so if those situations happen, that for those students the subsidy will cut it off, because so their family will have trouble, will have financial trouble after cutting off their subsidy. So this system can be the incentive to engage in their study hard, because those students may think that if I become rude, the family will have much big financial trouble. So this can be another incentive. So the argument about incentive doesn't stand. So let me.
Point of information.
Okay.
So if some students are drop out in the middle of the student, so you can achieve the purpose to save the poor people in the graduation of the school.
So the analysis coming from the CEO is about like students suddenly drop out but it's not true, because students gradually become rude and finally become finally they will drop out. So the way of the becoming rude, those subsidy will be cut off. So that is not so relevant to this motion. So let me thank you. So let me move to another point about legitimacy. Why it is legitimate to give money for the students who have to give up going to university, or students who are poor. So the main purpose of this principle is achieving equal opportunity of education, as we already told you. So regardless of any factor, any unchangeable factor for students. So that when you born in, or where you born in, or how wealthy your family is not it's unchangeable, and it's like kind of a versatile thing. So you cannot change structural difference from the you cannot change the structural difference it's there between the rich student and poor student to begin with. So if some student experience the if some student experience the unfair situation of their in terms of their education opportunity, it's a kind of failure of the government, failure of the state. Later, please. Yes. So we think that it is legitimate for states or government to give subsidy for the student. Yes. Okay.
We do recognize the importance of education. That's why we're saying it's problematic when that number of scholarships that people could get decreases.
Yes, the nuance coming from the opportunity side is about the giving money to bus, giving as many as students should have the money or subsidy to go to university. However, we think that the most important point is here, the who should be given those subsidies. So on that point, we are focusing on the giving money to only the poor or who have difficulty to go to school, but because of the financial reason. So on that point, yes, there our characteristic or factors should be valued in this motion, in this debate. So yes, let me confirm our engagement the most important point is about giving money to the who have difficulty for about financial difficulty, and the nuance coming from the LO is wrong, because we have already set a model, like we assess the student, and this motion can be another incentive to make students study hard. Thank you.
Deputy Prime Minister, Deputy Leader of Opposition, please give your speech in 7 minutes. Here.
Okay, in my speech, I'm going to clarify first what kind of consequences this not mandating repayment for those students will incur, because I don't think we live in this realistic or ideal world as opening government contextualized. And secondly, I'm going to talk about how we can deal with children who cannot pay back, and why I'm going to tell you why mandating payment is going to be better for those students. Okay, let's go one by one. So firstly, what kind of consequences this not mandating will incur? So as my partner already described, the money of the private association or the money of the government is limited, right? And secondly, we think those private associations like JASO have an incentive to get money back from students, right? Because otherwise they go bankrupt. So that's why we don't think we live in that kind of realistic world, but rather we think the realistic consequences that this not mandating will incur is amount of student loans will decrease, right? We think realistically there are going to be more strict criteria of students who apply for those kind of student loans. Why this is problematic? Because opening a government's entire case was equal education opportunity for all children. But that's not going to be impossible in realistic sense, right? We think on government, they're going to check when they, and also the crucial point is, as the model described by opening government, when they check all those kind of financial status of students is when they apply for those student loans, right? So that means what they check is most likely those parents of those children and their financial status. That means on the government side, they're only going to give those students loans to students who have the parents that have the steady job or have high-paying job. This is very contradicting on the purpose of student loans, because those who really need student loans is most likely those poor children or lower middle class students, right? If they only limit those student loans to those children whose parents have already steady jobs, we don't think equal opportunity for those children who desperately need student loans in the status quo will not be possible under their side. And this is going to be the fall of the entire case coming from opening government. Yes.
We never said that it's going to be the people with steady jobs getting the student loans that we are trying to change. It's going to be the people without stable jobs or without a stable income. We told you from the beginning. Okay,
in realistic sense, first I talked about how this is not going to be possible, but secondly I'm going to talk about why this mandating the payment for those children will be going to be better off for those children. This is going to be my second argument. So let me deal with those children who they said who cannot pay back. I have two responses. Firstly, there is the selection process when they seek for students who are really eligible for paying back, right? For example, if you go through those applying process, maybe but there's much paperwork when you apply for those students' loans, right? If you are desperately poor and if your parent does not have any steady job, you are not eligible for renting so much money. In most cases, that they will require you to have decent amount of time so that you have the capacity to pay back. So the conclusion is, I don't think those current situation, which is to say that those children are so stuck in the student loans that they're not unable to pay back, is not happening because there is a beforehand selection process. And those private associations have the incentives to do those kind of things because, as I said, they want money back from those students, right? So that means those unrealistic situation for those students is not occurring to begin with. Secondly, we think payment is paying those payment that those children are obligated is a decent amount of money, not like excessive amount of money, right? Which we think in most cases you can pay back those money because those private associations, as I said, have incentives to get money back, right? So that means that they don't demand you to pay an excessive amount of money per month, right? And also, for example, in most cases, like from my cases, like those private associations demand me when I graduate to pay back like 20,000 yen per month. That's a decent amount of money that even if you don't have a steady job that I can pay back, right? And in the highest cases, in those private associations demand you to pay. The highest case is like a 50,000 yen. So that means that it doesn't really incur the terrible situation where children are not really eligible to pay back. But what this a little amount of money does to those people is it incentivizes those people to work hard in college or have a steady job when they graduate, right? Because you see the constant you see on your bank account that you are renting some portion of money and you are in the current constant pressure that you have to pay back those money when you graduate, right? So that means that those students will feel obligated. So maybe in the status quo, those students will think that maybe when I graduate, I just need to go to a part-time job and stuff like that. But because they feel this constant pressure, this will more incentivize for those children to have more steady job because they're obligated. If we think if there is no pressure for those children, they have entire free 4 years under their side, right? This will lead to the students not making an effort in college, which is going to be very crucial. The conclusion here is we think that firstly, those students are able to pay back those money, and secondly, we think even if this is going to be hard, but this will incentivize those people to have more steady job or work hard in college, and this is going to be crucial. And the importance of this argument is the purpose of student loan is not to just help those poor students, but another purpose is this will we have to motivate students to climb up the social ladder, right? Because in the status quo we see this poverty cycle that for those poor children who are from poor community or poor family, they don't have any steady job, so this cycle continues and continues and continues, right? But if we are able to incentivize those students to work a little bit hard because they are this constant pressure of the mind that they have to pay those money back in the future, we think this will incentivize students to climb up social ladder and eventually crack down this poverty cycle we see in the status quo. This is going to be the purpose of this students' loan because this will not only help those poor children, but this will rather help those students to climb up the social ladder, which is going to be beneficial for children in the future. Very happy to propose.
Thank you, Deputy Leader of Opposition. Next member of government, please give your speech in 7 minutes. Here.
The specific factors that we want to protect from the closing government is that those poor people who pass the selection and who are willing to have education, who are willing to pursue education. And we think that under their paradigm, these people's education, academic lives are oppressed because of this. Because of the pressure to return the money, and they have the pressure to opt into the part-time job in order to make their living. That's the factor we want to prevent, and that's the clear stance coming from the closing government. I have 2 points from the member of member of government. Firstly, how students' lives and educational opportunity will be oppressed in in university, will be oppressed in their paradigm. And even if they happen to think in long term, and even if they happen to think rationally about the job option, why their job option is likely to be distorted in their paradigm. Before that, several pieces of individual rebuttal and clarification. A clarification is what kind of scholarship we stand for. Under the status quo, firstly, what we stand for is when those students reach a certain level of like income line, they will be mandatory. But if they are not in that line, they will not be forced. They will not be pressured to pay back. And secondly, we think the point about student performance is not mutually exclusive, because even under the status quo, many scholarships consider the school performance during the scholarship, and they stop the scholarship if necessary. As my senior student, Baba-san, he said if his GPA go down too much, his scholarship will be stopped. And we think that kind of system could still happen in our model. And thirdly, we think this is a value motion, and we need to consider whether these people's like educational opportunity are deprived. We think that, and secondly, we think that their point about people who cannot applicate, poor people cannot applicate. Firstly, we simply think that it's not mutually exclusive. Even in their paradigm, these people don't have an opportunity to applicate for this job, this scholarship for the same logic. And secondly, we are more than happy to try to provide assistance, and we are more than happy to try to provide high school scholarship if necessary. And thirdly, the crucial difference between the two paradigms is that whether these poor people who have passed the selection and who are willing and who have the motivation to study can really commit to those educational opportunities. And secondly, their point about motivation. Firstly, we think this is not mutually exclusive, as I mentioned in my model. And secondly, rather we think it's outside that they could act based on their motivation, because they have more time to use for their education, and they don't have to get their like time sacrifice for making for going to part-time job, for example, before go.
We're talking about these poor people who pass the selection and have motivation to study right now will not be able to pass the selection because the selection becomes more strict and the number of scholarships decrease, and they can't even go to university. Don't you think that's problematic?
We think the level of selection will not significantly change, as it will be based on the academic level, and as long as the people who decide these things feel that these poor people are capable of keeping the motivation, we think that these people could be selected. Moving on to my first point, how students' educational opportunity will be oppressed. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the necessary premise of how academy is expensive in the first place, just in case. Firstly, it is expensive because of school fees or dormitory fee when going to other place or going to other area to join the university. Or thirdly, this additional degree course like medical degree in USA costs $63,000. And we think when studying abroad, it obviously costs lots of money. And secondly, how their lives and education will be oppressed. We think that they have to, they will likely to care about returning the money, and they are likely to opt into part-time job. Why? Firstly, we think there's pressure to return, and there's deadlines, so people are likely to be irrational, and these students are likely to be incapable of thinking in the long term, and they are likely to prioritize part-time job over education to make a living. And secondly, there are other fundamental factors of life that they have to care about, like eating or place to live. If they have to care about returning the money and also about making the living, they will have to use lots of time and effort to opt into the part-time job. Therefore, we say they will have less time and energy for education, and because of this part-time job and their sacrifice. And secondly, these people are likely to suffer, and the initial role of the student loan was to give these people a chance to pursue their interests and pursue their educational opportunity. But we think in their paradigm, these kind of choices are deprived because of this pressure. Moving on to the second point, even if we assume they are rational. We think that people's future choice and job choices are distorted, and this has social impact. Firstly, given that students know that they have to pay significant amount of money, secondly, we think that they are, in order to pay the loan, graduates try to go to make job options that fairly pay higher. For example, the impact of is not only on the individual level, but also on social level. For example, medical school in many European countries is almost entirely free. But in the USA, a medical degree can cost you $63,000 per year. In order to pay that loan, or in order to pay the scholarship alone, graduates go to some high-paying part of medical profession like cosmetic surgery, even though people don't need more doctors in that area. As a result, there is a shortage of primary care doctors in 6,000 fields, especially in low-income neighborhoods. We say that their job choices will be likely to be distorted by this pressure, and that's why we are very proud to propose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Member of Government, Member of Opposition. Please leave your speech in 7 minutes. Here.
So the opening hand, both sides talk about what poor the students, so the sponsorship of the student loans, what should be done, what poor people, so, but the action of the exception, that condition to be the condition that to cut their duty of the repay their incentive, so rather harmful for the poor people. That's why we oppose these motions. So I have three arguments to arguments. So the consequence of the indulgence of the poor people, why that the situation is the serious that the whole nation should care about all. And second, so what is the purpose and what is the duty of the sponsorship? So why in the first place, why the people have the education in the society? And third argument is in shortage society's argument. Why in long term we should not ignore the potential of each person. Before going to arguments, I show some rebuttal to member of government. So first, as I said, so if that without that the condition of the government paradigm, some of the poor people can't have the opportunity to have education in the society. But it is not true, because even though our paradigm, the poor people can have some scholarship with the condition to repay back the money. So the target of we are opposing is the condition to exempt to repay back money if that the students are simple poor. So that's why, so the open government, so repeatedly said it rather decreases the incentive, it is rather decrease the incentive for the sponsor to offer the sponsors the services for the poor people. That's why the rest of poor people can have the opportunity to educate it in the school. That's why it is harmful. Then, my first argument. Why the situation, the consequence of the indulgence of the poor people is so serious in this debate. So, in opening government, to talk about the problems. So, if the duty of the repay, so money is exempted for the poor people. So, the poor people, the number of the such services, the scholarship services will decrease. That's why the opportunity of the the opportunity of such students to have education decreases. But even though some students get a high academic score in the school and their condition of the repay money is exempted, so that situation is very, very harmful for the students, because such the exemption conditions decreases the responsibility and discipline of the people to maintain their performance in their it decreases the incentive to have the get job, because if they have such a stable job, so such a sponsor of the scholarship impose a duty to repay such money. That's why it rather decreases for the poor people to not have that job, not have a stable job. That's why, so after taking this proposal, the people don't have that job after they graduate from that school. That's why they have accepted that miserable life without having the public welfare and to continue that poor situation. That's why the government action rather fix the poorness of the people because of the decreasing the incentive to have the stable job. That's why the people of the getting job in that university decreases. That's why the number of the poor people not solved in that the government action. That's why it is problematic in the society. That's why this contribution is important in closing operation. Secondly, the purpose of the scholarship. Why, in the first place, why we need to offer the scholarship to save the people? So it is to maintain the discipline of the people, so to activate the social ability in the society. So why we need to go to the school? So it is not simple to have the knowledge in the school. So in that school we learn to communicate each other, to communicate the social discipline in the society, and that's why the many corporations, the many companies, so evaluated significantly the university status. That's why the result that maintain the discipline in the social places. So, and to have the opportunity to have the social skill in the university is a significant of each person. That's why without that, the opportunity of the university educations, so that the poor people can't have the opportunity to have that high payment job. That's why it rather decrease the consequence of having the stable job for the poor people. That's why the scholarship is very necessary. That's why to increase the discipline of the people and to have the education in that university. That's why the purpose of the scholarship, the student loan, is more important in this debate. And third, yes.
Isn't the
yes. So thirdly, why we should not ignore the potential of each person. So any examination, any check of the economic status is just temporal. So it doesn't assume the potential of the poor people can have the stable job in their future life. That's why, so even though the poor people have the stable job in future life, and even though they have the incentive to repay back such a money, they cannot have that money to have opportunity to study in that university. That's why it rather cuts the opportunity for the poor people to have education. That's why their poor people's life is spoiled by their government action. That's why we happy to oppose.
Thank you, member of opposition. Government whip, please deliver your speech in 7 minutes. Here.
Yes, we do agree with the closing opposition that the education is important, and that's why we have to provide like those, especially those poor children, like poor kids who have made the effort to have the ground where they can concentrate on their studying, and that's why we're very proud to propose this motion. So. Three exclusive extension coming from the CG. First of all, we clearly told you what kind of options are limited with students, and which was missing in the OG, and we provided you like the more realistic context of where students have to like cannot study. Cannot concentrate on their studies as opposed to the opposition side, and thirdly, we were focused on the most important actor and most like the one who would be the influence the most, which is the poor students who have made effort, and that's the contribution coming from the closing government. No, thank you. All right. So first of all, let me first quickly engage with the CO. Right. So most of their points were about. Students would not be incentivized to work, but that was mostly came from the opening opposition. So I'm gonna tackle that in my next point. And secondly, and they talked about why going to school is important, and they talked about like how communication is important. But we say that kind of like communication could be like done in like compulsory education in the first place. What we're targeting to is like the specific knowledge that you have to like. You have to have like a deep knowledge, and that is only being met in university where like the cost is very high, right? And we say that and crucial thing from their side of the house is that like we totally agree with the closing opposition side that the going to school is very important, right? And we say that is not like the reason to like oppose this motion in the first place. Alright, so okay, before moving on, yes.
Okay, so amount of money you have to pay back in the future is like 20,000 yen, which you can pay back if you have a job, right? Why? Just because there's a student loan, students can't suddenly concentrate on study in college.
First of all, if the money that those children have to like pay back is so low, the pressurization that you're talking about will not happen in the first place. And secondly, and we say that even if like the amount is like, we say that like the amount is like actually because since as I talk later, like those students need loans, like big amounts of money at once, right? And that's why like they subscribe to those loans, and like those students have to pay back those loans even at the times when they are in the school, and that's why those students are actually working hard to like pay back those costs, right? And alright, okay, so let me first, okay, so is the loan really going to decrease on our side of the house? No, thank you. They talked about how like because it is run like private organization, the loan would decrease, right? I have 4 points of rebuttal to that. First of all, like those private organizations care about like the public image, and we're more than happy to provide like how much, like what kind of like those private organizations are targeting to, so that like people can like easily criticize those private organizations for just giving money to the rich kids who doesn't really need the loans, right? And secondly, we say that actually there are private organizations that targets the poor specifically, and we say that is, and thirdly, we say that when those private organizations select, we say that those corporations look at many aspects, and they don't just look at how much income they have or how much grade they have, right? We say that those corporations actually look at their personality or how much motivation they have, like with like actually meeting that person and talking to that people, right? So the selection, we say that even in our side, fourthly, we say that like those corporations are not only targeting the poor people, right? So we say that like they are actually like richer kids who actually get loans from those companies. So like we say that even if like those corporations actually targets the poor and select the poor, we say that like their profit would not going to like dramatically decrease. So they still have the incentive to give loans to those poor children, poor kids as well, right? So we say that like the loan would not decrease, like that dramatically decrease, as they want to say from the opening opposition side, right? And we say that even if they take the best case scenario and say that like the loan would decrease, we say that on our side of the house we can at least make sure that like those people who are born poor but made effort to get like the loans, like those people are secured like the environment where they can concentrate on their studies to pursue whatever the stable job it is. Like we say that like they say that like their side of the house is the one that students can pursue their stable job, but we say in order to get like those stable jobs that they're talking about, we say that those students have to concentrate on their study and get a good grades, right? So what happens on their side of the house is that maybe more poor people can get loans, but we say that when they actually get into university, they have to like work hard in order to like pay back like whatever the loans, right? We say that those students have less time to focus on their studies and like deepen their knowledge, so their grade is like more likely to decrease, and so that they cannot get a stable job, right? So we say that it's gonna be better on our side of the house, not theirs. And so what was our point? We said we told you about like what kind of choices like students are limited to, like they cannot like go to university in the first place because like education fee is very high, and maybe like they want to go abroad but the money is not there, right? But we say that so let me look at like how those loans look like. We say that because those students need a big amount of money at once, they subscribe to those loans, and they have to pay back the loans like maybe like each month, right? So we say that students have to work hard, work part-time job, and like when they're not going to school, they have to like all they do is like work part-time, and they don't have the time to study. And we say that we protect those poor people who have the motivation. That's why I'm very proud to propose.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Grant. With opposition, please go to your speech and cover the Here, here.
So the reason why majority people and also many people has to try to get more money and also have the incentive to get a good job is that they need money and also they want to have the money. However, if we take this point, some of the people in their paradigm still can do whatever they want to do without any sacrificing, for example, without any paying money. So that's why we believe that in their paradigm, people will have less incentive to get a good job and also to study hard. So we believe that today's debate should be the things that should be like which side can guarantee the poor people's life in the long run. However, today's opening team totally explained just only the short term, for example, during the school student's life. So in just only a closing on opposition side totally successfully explained the reason why we don't need this, we are not allowed to take this brand, and also why we have to do in the long run. So today's before moving on to our argument, I'd like to invitation to the government's whip. So they said that like those school loan is a kind loan is burden for those kind of poor people. However, we don't think so, because even though people can pay back after the graduation, so that's why during the school life, those people will have less burden, and also even if that is the burden, burden. That's not the burden, because this burden will be the incentive to study hard and also work hard. I'd like to explain more in my arguments. And also they say that the private company have the potential, private company will try to target people in terms of the personality and so on. However, this is not true, because private company is a profit seeker in the first level. So that's why those private company have the incentive to pay. Those private company wants to pay it back because that is their profit. So we can say that those company will find and also target the people who have more money, which means rich people. So their thing doesn't true. So today's class point is about which side can guarantee the incentive the student to get good job and also to get